Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 8 of Maniacs. And today we are interviewing Michael Doby. He attended World Harvest Bible College from 1995 to 1997. And it was his intent to just be there for the 2 years and go back to Florida. However, he ended up staying. He was offered a position at World Harvest Church in the security department, and then eventually was made acting director of security when the former director of security had abruptly left. And Michael wants to share his experiences while he was there in this position, the residual effects that have continued to last, including his marriage breaking up, and also how he is coping and moving forward from his experiences at World Harvest Church. So please help me welcome Michael to Megamaniacs. Hi, Michael. Welcome to Megamaniacs.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's a pleasure and an honor. And thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you reaching out and the conversations that we've had up until now. But like, every other guest that's on the podcast, why don't you start off by just giving us a brief overview on how you heard about World Harvest Church and World Harvest Bible College, and kind of what got you there for the 2 years and then kept you there after that.
Right? I don't mind at all. First, I like to say something. And
Sure.
it mentions, I like to talk about the heart, our hearts and motive, and why I chose to step forward and do this. And I just commend the bravery and the strength of all the previous guests that have had the strength and the courage to come forth and share their stories. And my heart is for hurting people, broken people, suffering people who've experienced the trauma of spiritual abuse and narcissistic abuse. And I don't have anything to gain through this. And I can look at this one or two ways. If I stay silent, people are going to suffer. And also all of us that are coming forth, it's going to have an effect on people as well. But my main primary focus today is hurting people who need to hear something that's comforting and encouraging them and letting them know that they're not alone and they are believable, because all these stories from different people are no coincidence. There's an issue, and I believe that God is beginning to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you. And I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and that northeast Florida area, and right on the coast. And I was saved when I was 21. I was a heathen among heathens before then. And but Jesus Christ got a hold of my life when I was 21 years old, washed me, cleansed me. And when you have that born again experience, there's no question about it. You know that you're different. And as I began to walk with the Lord, I remember an old cable network called the Inspirational Satellite Network. And somehow I came across Breakthrough World Harvest Church. And my every Saturday thing was to sit there and watch World Harvest Church, and that among going to my regular church down in Florida. And the Lord just got a hold of me. And at some point, he let me know that his call was upon my life for ministry and to preach the gospel. And that's when I began to hear about World Harvest Bible College. And it was in 1995 when I relocated up here. And actually, I was a student in the dorms for my first year, I believe. And it was after that first year that I was able to move into a location off campus with two other Bible college students, two males. And I was roommates with them. And but that's how I got. My intent was to only be here for 2 years and head back down there to sunny Florida.
Yeah.
But God had other plans. So I've been here since. I've been able to visit home periodically, but now this is where God has me, and this is His plan for my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, before we get into you actually being hired on by World Harvest in the security department, would you say that your time at World Harvest Bible College, which is now Valor Christian College, would you say that your time there was pretty uneventful as a college student, or did you have experiences when you were there that kind of made you raise some eyebrows?
I can remember one experience in particular. For the most part, on campus, I can't recall any quote maybe negative experience, but I do remember I was a student in the dorms my first year, as I said, and back then War Harvest was in its at its peak as far as the presence of God, the power of God, the anointing of God on every single service. I can remember on occasion when you walked into the sanctuary, even before service started, the presence of God was just so heavy back then. And some would agree that back then, that early to mid 90s, I mean, if you weren't lined up in one of those foyer doors, they opened at 9 o'clock. If you weren't there at 9 o'clock, you were in overflow, you know, or you just come to service. I mean, the parking lots were full back then. People were parking on the grass on the south side of the property. But I do remember one particular situation that was maybe you could say an eye raiser, eyebrow raiser for me. I remember one Sunday morning, I was sitting in the risers. And if you're seated in the risers, you know, you're facing the platform. And this is back before all the renovations took place in the sanctuary. And I remember praise and worship was taking place. It just as powerful as it could be. And for whatever reason, as I'm sitting in the risers, I just happened to look over to the right of the sanctuary. And those, what they call the A-wing doors leading into the sanctuary from the hallway were propped open. And I don't even know why, Robin, but I just happened to look over there at a glance, and there was a group of people standing outside those A-wing doors in the hallway area there, and one of them were Pastor Parsley. And to me, it just looked like he was just having a rage, just an absolute fit. You can't hear anything because praise and worship and everybody's focus is on the Lord and everything. But I could just tell by his body language that he was just having an absolute fit with somebody, arms flinging, everything. And I was just like, that's odd. And then I just went back to focusing on service. And when he came in and everything, and a song or two later, he took the platform. It's like he was a totally complete person. And I'm just sitting in my seat, just trying to make this make sense. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know about all the experiences that I was going to have after that, being hired on and all of that, because my plan, like I said, was only to be here for 2 years and then go back home. But that's one of the things that I witnessed that kind of resonated with me, and one of the things I remember to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, you shared that with me. And then, so you were then, after you completed your degree in 97, or completed college, because I don't think that they were accredited back then, but um, so you completed in 97 and then had intended to go back to Jacksonville, but God had different plans. And
He
then
did.
you were offered a position at World Harvest in the security department.
Yes.
And I know eventually you were made the active security director when the current director had left abruptly, which I mentioned
Yes.
in your intro. But did you have experiences before becoming the director that or acting director that again were making you question or raise eyebrows that maybe something was off or different than you thought that they were?
Um, I could say yes. And but first of all, let me say this is when I completed Bible college, uh, it was later than 97 because of demand and everything of being on staff at some point. I decided to, come out of Bible college, be on staff, and I
Oh, okay.
eventually going back and finishing Bible college. So,
Oh, okay. I didn't
yeah,
realize that. So you left because they offered you a position and you could not give full attention to the position and to your schoolwork at the same time. Is that right?
right. And plus the
Okay.
demands I had at home with a family and everything, I decided to pull
Okay.
out of Bible college, put that on the back burner for a while. But yeah, I eventually went back and finished. But
Okay.
yeah, the gentleman that was serving as the director before he left, I was an officer with the rest of the team, and that was the uniform division, and which basically focused on campus, some residential work out at the Parsley's home and everything, but primarily the main campus. And it was just there were some experiences that were really, really eye opening.
Mhm.
And I can talk about both the uniform division and the executive protection division because I served them both. And I don't, it's almost like you're trying to make things balance out. You got a pastor and you got your boss, your employer, who's both, you know. And
Yeah.
but there were just times, Robin and others may agree, you didn't know who you were dealing with at any given time, and some of the verbal directives were very, very abrasive. And because we reported to everybody, we reported to pastor, we reported to pastor's father, we reported to pastor's mom. Everybody was our boss. And you may get directives from one and a different set of directives from the other. And contrary, it's like, okay, what do we do?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there were some experiences, and I can give you examples of both being in uniform and
Sure.
being on the executive protection division. I remember when the director before I was, when he left abruptly and returned to his area back in the southeast, uh, they're trying to fill that void, and I was asked to come to the division director's office. And back then, the division director was a gentleman by the name of Bill Souders. And I'm like, okay, oh, wow, am I in trouble? So I go into that meeting in his office, and he's there, and a couple of other people were there. And they said they need to fill this void. They need somebody to supervise and run security. And they asked me if I would consider stepping up and doing it. I'm like, man, this is an honor. Of course. Yeah, I'd love to do it. And I'm like, what am I going to be doing? And that's when Mr. Showers told me, you'll be serving as the acting director. And I knew then that what that meant is a filler until they find who they eventually wanted to fill that position. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Great. So over the course of time, there were experiences that I began to have that made me go, what is this? Is this church? Is this ministry? Is this a corporation? What is it? And there are times, and I want to go ahead and say this now so I don't forget, over a period of time, especially my tenure there as an employee, as a student at the Bible college, and even as a member of the church, because I stayed at the church even after my employment ended. But more and more and more, I began to feel like War Harvest wasn't so much of a church as it was a corporation that operated like a church, if that makes sense.
Or pretend. Well, that's what I actually, it's funny you said that because when I was there and even now, I said it was corporate America pretending to be a church, but
Yeah.
it was whatever suited them, right? So
Mhm.
they if it suited them better to run like an actual business, then they called
Mhm.
themselves a business. And if it suited them more to run like a church, then they called it a church. And so it was all of the above, but
Right.
in my opinion, definitely corporate America and religion, if you will,
Mhm.
was their product. And that's how they've gotten rich.
Yeah. And I can recall a time where Pastor Parsley was on the platform one morning during the Sunday morning service. And he's like, man, I'm a CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. And that just, I don't know, that just didn't feel right. Hearing that,
Mhm.
like, no, you're the pastor of a ministry. I didn't say that, but this is what I'm thinking, you know. And I remember one time I was, if I recall correctly, this happened after a Sunday morning service where one of his executive administrative assistants came to me and said, hey, we need you to come to A Wing after the service. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, oh boy, what's going on? And I was told that they're going to be releasing somebody, termination, releasing whatever it was. And they told me I needed to be in the hallway near the A Wing conference room. And anyone that knows that area knows that his executive area is on one end of A Wing and the conference room is on the other end of that long hallway in the executive wing. And I'm like, okay. At this point, I don't know who's been released or anything. And then they finally told me who it was. It was a young lady by the name of Carrie Price at that time. And I see her come walking down the hallway, and I knew immediately. I'm like, oh my Lord, what is about to happen? And I wasn't inside the conference room while this release was taking place. They wanted me outside in the hallway in case they needed my assistance or anything like that. And she didn't cause any problems at all. She was very, very gentle. But once inside the conference room, all I heard was a screaming tirade. I wouldn't talk.
From Rod or from someone
Yes.
else?
Oh, from Rob partially. I would not talk to a pet that way. He screamed. He yelled at her worse than I ever heard anybody spoken to in my entire life. My personal life, doing security, doing executive protection, I have never heard anybody scream at the way she was screamed at. I believe he said something to the effect of, why am I getting phone calls 3 o'clock in the morning about, and I'll mention what I heard. And apparently he was upset with her because she went, I believe the night before or the day before, and sang for another church or another ministry. And I'm like, because before I heard it, I'm okay, what has she done? Is she embezzling? Did she do something? I'm like, and it's all because she sang for another ministry. And he released her. So after this 15, 20-minute shouting tirade takes place, she comes out of the conference room and she's just totally, completely broken. Her makeup, everything, she's just in a puddle of tears. So I'm stuck between, oh my Lord, do I step out and try to console this young lady? But at the same time, I got a responsibility to protect him, you know? So that's one of the incidents that just stuck with me, you know? And I'm glad that you brought that up and gave me the opportunity to speak on that first, because Robin, in my field and what I do, especially personal protection, we have to carry a command presence, you know, and because it's a deterrent, because people will believe, I'm not going to mess with the protectee because this guy looks like he means business, you know? And sometimes I've thought about it a lot, that if anyone feels like, because I was with pastor, if I was with his mom, or if I was with his dad, if that made them feel intimidated, especially some of these people that have been broken because of his behavior, his manner of speaking, if I was with him when any of this took place, I asked them to forgive me. If I made them feel intimidated, I can't recall a situation other than that one. But if anybody by my presence with him while he was having one of these tirades, if that made them feel intimidated, like they couldn't speak up, I apologize for that. But yeah, but that was one of the first experiences that I encountered or had that I can recall where he was just off. I remember the video clip with the staff members doing a TV shoot. I saw that recently. That was mild compared to this. And if anybody would have spoken to
the one that I had recorded on
yes,
episode 12, I think. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
Mixtures in the right place for the camera shots. Yes, sir. Could we wake up? Yes, sir. And you people want to go to Israel and do a shoot? You can't do one on the property.
And I believe if anybody had spoken to his daughter, his wife, or his mom the way that he was speaking to Carrie, he wouldn't allow it.
Oh, absolutely not. And I have a question even in regards to that, because I know Carrie, and
Mhm.
if you've watched Breakthrough or watched any of the live streams, you've likely seen her singing on the platform. But
Mhm. Yes.
she is a very petite woman,
Yes.
and I'm kind of shocked that Rod would feel like he needed protection
Mhm.
from this little petite woman that he was expecting that she would fight against whatever he was getting ready to dole out to her.
Right. And I didn't even know until that moment that this was even going to take place.
Right,
And
right.
I was approached by a member of the executive administrative staff that, hey, you need to come to wing out the service. I'm like, okay. But one, one of the feelings that I've always had there, even after I was on staff, is there's a control there that's so ungodly. And the word tells us that our gifts and our callings are from the Lord, and they're to edify and bless the entire body. But for some reason at Wall Harvest Church, there's a sense that your gifts don't belong to God, they belong to Rod, you know? And you're made to
If that
feel
ain't
like, hey,
the quote of the century, Michael.
yeah. I mean, it's like they don't belong to anybody else. Wall Harvest Church is the mecca of ministry. And no, you're there, everything belongs to them. Whether you're on staff, whether you volunteer, there's just like this, it's like this huge web with tentacles that has a hold of you. And you don't realize the degree of the control and the fog that's over your mind until you are out of it and God completely detox you from it all. And then you're able to
Absolutely.
look back and say, oh my Lord, I can't believe I was wrapped up in all that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, we hear that from most of the guests, right? That at one point in time that they were mesmerized or they were in love
Mhm.
with the ministry and couldn't wait to serve in any capacity that they could. And then once they're given the opportunity and they kind of can peek behind the curtain a little bit,
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
they start to see that what they thought was reality is not, and it's all a farce basically, and
Yeah.
how they actually operate behind closed doors is
Yes.
completely the opposite of what you see on TV.
Right. And I would 100% wholeheartedly agree with that because I was like everyone else. I was mesmerized, and this guy's the closest thing to walking on water as the Lord Jesus Christ was. And, but yeah, it's like once you have the opportunity to work closely with the family, you see what's you see the character. And you know what? It's like gifts are for what we do, but character is who we really are. And when people are hardened to the point to where when they have a tirade or a fit in public, that's just even in front of other people. And I say that to say this: one of the other experiences that I had is I was doing back one of the camp meetings, and I'm going to say it was probably '96. No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking '98 or '99, one of
Okay.
those. And back then, the church had what was called the D Wing Commons. And I was like a little cafeteria in the D Wing
Yeah,
area
that's where the
where,
cafeteria for the school and everything is now.
okay, awesome,
Okay.
awesome. And back then, our camp meetings, they weren't 3 days. They were from Sunday to Friday, 3 services a day. And the D Wing Commons were used for people who wanted to stay on the campus between services, stay in the air conditioning, rest, buy food, concessions, etc. And so there are a lot of kids in that area also with their parents and everything. And a lot of the kids' activities took place in the gymnasium back then, which was adjacent to the cafeteria. And I was posted in there one day between the camp meeting services. And Pastor partially came in with the chief financial officer back then. His name was John Laria. And Pastor looks at me and I look at him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go walk and see what he says. Because I could tell by the eye contact, he wanted to say something. And as I got closer to him, he's like, where's I'm like, excuse me, sir? He's like, look at this place. People in there eating, and so of course it's not going to look immaculate. People are in there in between 3 services all day. And back then, Dave Wolf, he was one of the directors of the custodial division. And I'm like, sir, I'll try and find him for you. He's like, you clean this place up. I'm like, okay, I'll get right on it. I know I got to watch these kids and everything else also, but yeah, I'll get it done, sir. And there were people sitting there who were attending services, and they look at me like, he's talking to you like that? And I just pretty much dismissed it, got it done. And by that time, the custodial crew were coming into the viewing area to get that taken care of. And that's another experience that I had that wasn't very pleasant. And I can remember another time. By then, I'm starting to think, Lord, what is this Jekyll and Hyde thing going on? Because with him, it was like one moment he'll be totally just sweet and nice. And at the flip of a switch, it's like the incident that happened in the D-Wing comments with me. And then 5 seconds later, he'll walk over to someone else and just hugging, loving, talking about the Lord, and it's just, I'm like, Lord, this is crazy. And back then, I didn't have a clue about narcissism, narcissistic abuse. And, but I'll get into that because it wasn't after I had left the ministry that the Lord led me down to studying on that subject. But
sure.
Robin, I'm sorry.
No, I said sure. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I do recall another incident, several. As I said, back in the height of the ministry, the early to mid 90s, maybe even the late 90s to a degree, and the parking lot was just overflow seating and overflow parking.
Right.
And I recall an incident where cars were just everywhere. People were so hungry, not so much for Rod, but for God. And they just come from all over the country. And they just wanted the presence of God, a touch from the Lord. And if there are no parking spaces available anywhere, they just parked anywhere and just got inside the building. And I got a call to come to the North Foyer. This is what it was called back then. And I got to the North Foyer and I could see Pastor parked up under the canopy there. And I knew I was supposed to go out and speak with him. I recognized the vehicle. And even before I could make it to the vehicle, he was already having a tirade about how cars were parked everywhere. I'm like, sir, we got a small crew working. We can't take care of the building and take care of parking all at the same time. And he just released it all under me. And finally, when he had released it all, he just pulled away and just took off. But I'm like, God, this is really beginning to get unbearable. But it's almost like this, and maybe some of the other guests who've been on staff would agree. It's like when you're on staff there, that's the will of God for your life, which may well be. But at the same time, a time of release comes. But there's almost this wrestling with, if I don't leave, I'm out of the will of God. You're conditioned to believe that being there and going through the abuse is the will of God for your life.
Right.
So you're just suffering for the Lord. Well, that's just the way he is. No, that's not the way he is. That's abuse. And it's unacceptable. And but I recall that incident, and we were talking earlier about the gentleman that served as director before he left abruptly. And there was a service where pastor's having another one of those in the sanctuary doing a service. And he's having a tirade, so to speak, from the platform. And he was upset and angry about trash that was in a bag of trash that was sitting in the parking lot when he came in. And apparently our security vehicle, whichever officer was driving it, passed it. And pastor was upset about why did that officer stop, get out of the security vehicle and take care of that bag of trash. So the gentleman that served as director, his name was Deacon Freeman, and pastor from the pulpit just calls him out right in the middle of a service. Like, Deacon, I just came in here and I drove past a bag of trash, and one of your officers drove by and wouldn't even stop and pick it up, you know? And I want to say this in the right heart, in the right spirit, in the right attitude. But if the officer drove by and then pick it up, why did you drive by and not pick it up? You know? And we're humble. And one of the things that come to mind is, I believe it's in Acts somewhere, where the people saw the power of God on the lives of the disciples or the apostles. And they wanted in. And Peter's like, no, wait, we're men too. You know, we can't allow pride to exalt us to the point to where we think we're above everybody else. And we can
Right.
get away with things that other people can't get away with.
Mm-hmm.
We can
Mm-hmm.
treat people in certain ways, speak to people in certain ways that other people cannot, because we're all harvest. We have favor that other people don't have, and we're not
Right.
accountable to anybody. And
Mm-hmm.
that increases the atmosphere of abuse that's still taking place there today. And it's been
Mm-hmm.
there for decades and decades and decades.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you, and because I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you just said. In your opinion, I mean, based on your own experiences, and then I know both of us, because we've never really met each other, but in
Right.
our because of our own experiences, whether they be there or in our personal lives, that we've done kind of our own research about narcissism and narcissistic abuse and gaslighting and
Yes.
the honeymoon stage and all of those things that go along with narcissism. Why do you think so this is happening to you in the late 90s?
Mhm.
It's 2024. Why do you think that people still kind of turn a blind eye to this stuff? Do you think that they still just believe that God's will is for them to be in that position and take that abuse, or do you think that there's brainwashing? I mean, what do you think?
A combination of all. I believe that some people who may still be there, I've been totally, completely disconnected from the ministry since 2018.
Okay.
If people are still there from as far back as the 90s, and which some still are, I think it's a combination of all. I believe there's some deception there that makes them believe that if they leave, they're out of the will of God. I believe
Yes.
they're being controlled and don't know that they're being controlled. Some may be later up in age, and like, if in my life, I've been here for 10, 20, 30, some maybe even 40 years, where am I going to go? And with others, their loyalty is to man, not to the Lord. So they'll overlook and justify whatever they see and whatever they hear. Some others, it may be they're going along to get along. And some, I believe, look at it from a viewpoint, especially if they're going to be in ministry, that it may be almost like, if I can make this make sense, it's almost like a mafia mentality. And partially is the don of the ministry mafia. And I better be in good graces with him, because once I step out, I don't want him to put the hit out on me. I don't want
That's
him
right.
calling other ministries and blackballing me. So if I'm in with him, I'll get speaking invitations. I'll get this invite, that invite. If I can get his approval, I'll be in. But that shouldn't be our heart, And I believe this, anybody there in the leadership, and I say this in the right heart, in the right attitude, anybody in leadership that is fully aware of the corruption, of the abuse, of the mistreatment of others, and they're going along with it, they're culpable. They're equally accountable, and quite frankly, I believe they're going to equally share in the justice, because God sees all and God hears all, and nothing gets past him.
Absolutely. Well, and it always, we've talked about this in previous episodes. But even when we look at scriptures about, um, you know, preachers and teachers and pastors being held to this higher standard, um, because they, it's not easy to be in that position, but you should also be able to look at and test the fruit of these people.
Yes.
And when you look at them and, I mean, and look at the fruits of the spirit, I don't see any of them. And
Hmm.
and again, I was there, almost 4 years, about kind of the same amount of time you spent there as a staff member.
Hmm.
And when you start looking at it from that lens and that viewpoint, I
Yeah.
feel like it was a little bit easier for me to really see the writing on the wall rather
Yeah.
than thinking, okay, this guy is a pastor, and he's
Mm.
got and his daughter and his family, they've got this seemingly successful ministry for all of these decades. They can't really be as bad as everyone is making them out to be. And then
Yeah.
you experience it. And I know for me, I still tried to justify it in some kind of way because
Yeah.
I see, I think most people probably view pastors like they view doctors, right? They
Mm.
are educated, they have our best interest
Mm.
at heart. They have information that we don't have. And so they surely are not going to set us up for failure or
Mm.
um make us believe things that are not true. And so then when you start seeing these other things, it's very,
It's hard.
very an uncomfortable dynamic,
Hmm.
because you think one thing, but what's actually reality is something that's clear over here from what you thought.
Yes. It's almost like a nonverbal gaslighting,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
And I remember growing up as a kid, this is, before salvation and everything, we often went to church. Single parent home. One of the things is, especially in my culture, you go to church every Sunday, you go to Sunday school, and then you go to main service. And but we have to be born again. And that didn't happen until I was 21. But I'm saying that to say this is, even growing up, going to church, I was around pastors, I was around deacons, I was around elders. And even after my born again experience, before I moved to Columbus, I've been around pastors, elders, church leadership. But I can just say this, it's just like, it wasn't until I came to Columbus, Ohio, that I saw a pastor, witness a pastor just totally scream, yell, and berate people. And I'm trying to make this make sense. And I've heard others say, well, oh, you don't know the stress of ministry. You don't know how it weighs. That's no excuse. Because if that were true, 99% of all of our pastors worldwide would be behaving the same way. And no, we can't keep justifying and making excuses for behavior that is just inexcusable. And but it's and people have got to wake up. And sometimes people will take, well, I'm just going to believe God is going to change him. I'm believe God's going to change it. I'm believing it's going to go back to the way it was before. We can't change people. They have to have the will and desire to change. We can't pray against somebody's will, you know? And not only that, Robin, but I'll also say that God gives time and space for repentance. He did it with Jezebel. And during that period where he's trying to deal with an individual's heart, especially in ministry, there's still sheep in that church, in that ministry that God cares for. And his focus is on them, ministering to them. So what will happen is that minister or that person or that leader will think, oh, God's still moving. Look at the anointing. Look at this. Look at that healing. Look at that miracle. Look at this. And they think they're justified and can get away with their behavior, but don't even realize their heart is getting harder and harder and harder. to the point that they can't even sense the conviction of the Spirit of God anymore.
Absolutely. Well, and they are equating these signs, wonders, and miracles to themselves. They don't even give
Mm.
God the gratitude and the
The honor,
what's the
the
word I'm
glory.
looking for? The glory, yes, the glory of those signs, miracles, and wonders happening. They want to take credit for them themselves. And that's ego and pride and
Yes,
narcissism.
right, right.
And
And
and but people do that too, unfortunately, because I think that people do have experiences there, supernatural experiences with God, because like you said, God's hand is still on them even in this environment that isn't really that healthy. But when they have these experiences inside of those walls,
mhm,
they are many times are also equating that to world harvest, to rod, instead of saying God can bless me anywhere. He can give me miracles
mm,
anywhere. And
yeah,
I just happened to be inside this building when it happened, but I don't need to equate that to Rod Parsley or World Harvest Church.
I see. That's
Yeah.
right. And
Okay.
and sometimes God is moving not because of us, but in spite of us.
In
You
spite
know,
of, absolutely.
and that doesn't mean that He approves of their behavior. And as more and more and more comes out, is to lead the leadership there to repentance, true repentance. Because when we truly repent, we don't need to go on a campaign of trying to act good, trying to act nice. It's just it's going to be real. It's going to be genuine, and we don't have to go on one of these campaigns where we're trying to look good and act good. The change is going to be real, and it's going to be evident, and the behavior is going to change. And it's just it's not my place or anyone else's place to say, hey, do you believe he's repentant? Only God knows that. But the fruit and the genuine change will be seen in a change of behavior.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the part, I even say it to my kids, don't keep apologizing, just change your behavior, because
Right.
that's the best apology is change behavior. And you don't have to go on a campaign of proving how good you are and proving how different you
Mhm.
are. It there is a
Damage control.
humbleness. Yeah.
Damage control is what I call it.
Damage
You know?
control. That's right. That's right. But there is a humbleness to truly repenting um and knowing that the Lord has changed your heart, and
Mhm.
in return for that you are changed, and
Yeah.
you may not necessarily look different, but you do act different.
Mm. That's true. That's
Yes.
true. And and we're talking about some of my personal experiences there. And I recall an incident where I believe pastor was out on the road, and I have been out on the road, very limited, but I have traveled, and I'll talk about some of that, some of the crusades and church services that took place out on the road. But we took care of his family when he was out preaching, and the main campus, the church campus, was our primary focus. But at the same time, we made sure that his family was safe when he was out preaching. And there was one incident, I can't get into specific details, but I know what I can and can't say. And there was an incident where something happened to the gate leading into his main property. And what happened was, I believe, either later that night, that day, or the next day, the security department, we just got ripped like shreds. And it's just, I won't get into the details, but there was a comment made by, I got a bunch of toy cops keeping me alive. And it was just so insulting and so belittling. And some of the looks on the other officers' faces was just like, wow, we're the ones that are going to step in front of the bullet for you, you know? And to treat us like that is just the narcissistic abuse, the pride, the anger. It's just it's venomous. And I can only imagine me being 6'3", 270 and having to hear that. I can imagine how it makes, like you mentioned, Carrie, so frail, so petite. I can imagine what it does to others. Because I'll say this, when it comes to volunteering, when it comes to being on staff, maybe even some members, church is where we're completely open and vulnerable because we're there for the Lord and we trust him. That's the last place we expect to be abused emotionally and verbally. That's the last place we
And
expect to be
spiritually.
traumatized.
Yeah.
Yes, amen. And but unfortunately, that's where some of the most devastating heartbreak has taken place for people. And you know what? I'll say this, Robin. It's like we always hear the phrase, well, what's in the head gets in the body. What's in the head gets in the body. But the majority of our ministers only want to present that from a positive standpoint, but not the negative. If your head is arrogant, haughty, spiteful, mean, and nasty toward people, that's going to trickle down into your division directors, your department heads, and even volunteers. Because at some point, I want to talk about some of the marketing stuff that I've seen there. And I recall a Sunday morning service where I was posted in that A-wing hallway that I was talking about earlier, leading into the sanctuary. And back then, I don't know if it's like that now, but the TV studio was just adjacent to that door also. And I remember the team was getting ready to head into the sanctuary for the beginning of the service. And I'm not saying this is Pastor Parsley's attitude or mindset, but this is how that pride can trickle down into the people who even volunteer for you. And as they were breaking their huddle, the TV crew, to go into the sanctuary to prep and get into positions for service, I heard one of them say, hey, when we start shooting, don't show any fat people. And I'm standing there like, I can't believe this guy just said this. He said, when we start shooting, don't show any fat people, guys. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me,
Oh my
And
gosh.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, just like you said, there are, there is a trickle down effect, which we've also been saying, but people, unfortunately, many that are in that inner circle and are in leadership positions, or even, just have a position where they are speaking to other people, they start behaving in the same way, and many of them are behind closed doors are praised for it, praised for behaving just like the Parsleys behave.
exactly.
And that's just so unfortunate.
And it gets to the point to where people may not even realize it's happening.
Right.
Because it's like, man, you're becoming just like them, And that's why I mentioned at the beginning that because of my stature and everything in the work that I do, carrying that command presence, if I ever made anybody feel intimidated, like they couldn't speak to him, they couldn't interact with him. And if I made them feel inferior, if I made them feel like, oh my Lord, pastor, security, I apologize for that, because I didn't know and I don't know if that's the effect that I had on people. But many experiences of things that I've witnessed, things that I experienced personally, and it's just in that narcissistic mindset, in that narcissistic mode, you're trained, whether you realize it or not, you're molded to where all you say is yes, regardless of the effect that it has on you or your family.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 24/7 there, and I was 24/7 on call, it's yes, yes, yes. Whether it's running errands, whether it's bam, I'm going to so-and-so. Okay. there are times me and some of the other members of the security team, especially the protective team, where we're going to go somewhere and we can't do an advance. And if anybody's in the security field, they understand what that is. The team goes out ahead of time. Let's say a pastor wanted to go to a basketball game in Circleville. I'll just throw that out there. And because the Bible college team or the Ballard team is going to put a game in Circleville. And there may be times I don't know until 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock working that, hey, we got a game tonight that we're going to. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't have time to do an advance. Where are the restrooms? Where are the emergency exits? Where's he going to park? So on and so forth. But it's always yes, and
Absolutely.
And I can recall
It
times
has
where
to be yes. No should not be in
yes,
your vocabulary.
yes. And now for security reasons, there were times where things were done under an alias. And there were things that were done under my name, my personal Michael Dobie name. And if I had to pick something up for him, something to eat or something like that, it was ordered in my name. And I go pick that up, and take it to the church or take it to his house. But and that's normal in the security field, within reason.
Within reason.
Within reason. Yeah, it's like I was saying, and I didn't just have security experiences in uniform, but plain clothes or protective details as well. And sometimes people may ask, does he need all that security? Why does he have bodyguards? And why does he need personal protection? And I can answer that honestly and say, back at the peak of World Harvest Church, we're talking the 90s, I would say we were dealing with some pretty credible threats against him and his family. I won't go into any details, but I don't know what it's like there now, me being departed, leaving the staff 2001, somewhere in there, but remaining a member, but being totally disconnected from the ministry since 2018. I don't know about the security operations there. But when I was there, especially when I was on staff, it was needed. And
and I think that I asked you that. I asked you, was there were there real threats or real reasons why there would need to be such heavy security detail? And you very quickly said absolutely that there were definitely, very credible threats to him and the family, and that security was needed. And I know that you can't share a lot of details, but I would venture to say, since the congregation is, 5 to 700 instead of 5 to 7,000, that the risk for threat is much, much smaller now, or not at all, compared to the height of the ministry.
I would agree with that, because I don't think that they have the national or international exposure today, especially television, as they did back in the 90s or back in the time when I was on staff there. So I would say that if I did a threat assessment on the ministry now compared to back then, I don't think there's a need for security today that they had back then. And I enjoyed it. I had the pleasure of serving in the uniform division and in the personal protection division. And but it was hard work, difficult work. And so there were times we were just walking in the blind, and but we did our best. And I appreciate all the officers that worked for me, that worked beside me. And my heart goes out to them still, because of some of the abrasive treatment that we received while we were there. The incident about, you guys are a bunch of toy cops, that hurt some of the guys, and especially with me, the incident in D-Wing, where I was personally just belittled. I was able to get through it. And but more than what I experienced personally, the incidents that I witnessed other people experiencing, like Carrie, what she went through, and meetings. It was just, God, is this a pastor or is this a CEO? And but I've never seen in my entire life where in a ministry vein, someone can be nasty, mean, and abrasive to one individual. And 20 seconds later, totally, completely nice and sweet to another individual. It's like, how did the switch go? It's like, okay, lights are on, cameras on, let's hit it. Okay, let me get in my love vein, and that's the way it was with Pastor Parsley. I
Mm-hmm.
did experience some good there. He helped me in a couple of situations that I needed help in, but that doesn't negate or excuse the decades long abuse that people have suffered, you know? And, but I believe that God is doing a restorative work in the lives of a lot of people, and their time of restoration has come. And fortunately, unfortunately, a time of justice has come for others, because some of the abuse wasn't just through pastor, but it was through some family members also.
Sure.
And I had some experiences with Miss P, pastor's mom, Miss Parsley. We all called her Miss P. And I'm willing to share some of that. And I truly believe in her latter, she's passed on now. And I believe in her latter days, the closer that she came to transitioning over into eternity, that there was a change in her heart. And she was a much kinder, gentler, sweeter woman. But back in the day, I mean, her knife was as sharp as, rods at Pastor Parsley's. And I had a couple of experiences with her that weren't very pleasurable. And I went to Charleston, South Carolina, and with a couple other guys from the security department. And Pastor was doing a crusade or a church service in Charleston. And so with a detail, we picked them up from the hotel and we're driving them to the church or the venue where the service is taking place. And everything's going great. The service was great. It's the end of the night. It's the end of the service, but pastor's going to stay behind and fellowship with some other pastors in that area. So one of the other guys on the detail that went with us to Columbus, from Columbus to Charleston, he turns, "Hey, Mike," and I look back, and here comes a set of keys, and I catch him. He's like, "Take Miss P back to the hotel." I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, "Take Miss P back to." I didn't drive from the hotel to the venue. I rode. So now I'm thinking, okay, all I got to do is think of how we got here and do the same thing in reverse, and I'll get her back there. I'm thinking this. I'm not saying anything, but I'm thinking this. I'm like, I got this. So we go. I get her in the vehicle. I step around. I get in the driver's side. As soon as I get in and close the door, she looks at me and goes, "And you better not get me lost." I'm like, oh my gosh. The way she said it, it was like, "You better not get me lost." So I'm like, okay, I better not get Miss P lost. And I better remember how to get to the hotel. And I got to stay in that security vein also. But I thank
Mm-hmm.
God that he led me, behind that driver's seat. And I was able to get her back to the hotel. And once I got her inside the hotel, as far as I took her was the lobby. That's the way it was. There was a fine line between how male-female interactions took place. And but I got her to the lobby. They assisted her to get up to her room. And I got back into the vehicle to go back to the venue. And I took a deep breath. And I'm saying, "Thank you, Lord." For a moment, I thought I was going to squeeze the Charmin. But God's good. And I got back to the venue and everything went well. But that was one experience on the road, and that I probably won't ever forget.
Right.
For the most
Right.
part, my experiences on the road were pretty positive. I can't recall something where I could say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore." The
Well,
majority of
and I
my
have a
experience.
question that I didn't actually ever ask you, even when we spoke initially. And that was, were reg- either in your uniform detail, the security detail, I know there's like protection, uniform, security. I might be getting that all mixed up. But
Okay.
were any of you armed?
How can I answer that without answering that? And by not answering that, I'm answering that. I don't know what the security operation is like there now, but I can say that there were times that let's say we were prepared. If there was an incident that would have happened, I would say both. I would say there were times and there weren't times.
Okay. Did
Depending,
you ever know Rod or any of the other Parsleys to be armed?
um, I knew that they had weapons. I knew that Pastor had weapons and his father had weapons. But at the same time, I don't know if there was a time when he was with me, and we're talking way back when I was there. And I know about some incidents that have happened recently in a meeting at the church, but I don't recall a time where he was with me or with one of the other security agents that he was armed. I knew they had weapons on the property, his residential property, but I don't recall the time. I knew that they had weapons, but no, that's something that we never even focused on because our primary focus is protecting him.
Yeah. And the only reason I asked that was obviously because in that very first episode that I did for Megamaniacs about the gun getting shot off in the meeting, and there are several people that have confirmed that he not only has a weapon, near him at all times, but there are weapons throughout the ministry. And I also bring that up because it is a school, and when you walk in any of those doors, it says that weapons are not permitted
Yes.
on the grounds or in the facilities, but he can have weapons at his disposal even when school is going on, but other people are expected not to bring weapons onto the property. It's just that dynamic, and that's the reason why I wanted to ask and see if you were aware.
No, I wasn't aware of any time when I did security at the church or details with him or his family. I'm not aware of a time where he was armed. Now, when you bring up the campus, that's a serious, serious issue because you're talking about liability. You're
Sure.
talking about, criminal situations because schools are gun-free zones. No matter if you're private or public, schools are gun-free zones. And but it, the legal staff can try and split hairs and figure out what part of the property is considered a school and what part of the property isn't considered a school. But either way, when a firearm misfires and you have the probability of anybody getting critically injured because of a careless act like that, you've got serious, serious issues that can also open up litigation. And that, again, whether it was accidental, which it probably was, it still instills fear and intimidation into people, and emotionally
Well, and that was,
and
yeah, that was the
psychologically.
other point that I was trying to make also in asking that is that, I mean, Rod is not a small man, even in his own right. He's tall,
Right.
he carries himself with authority.
Mhm.
And it's my understanding, that Ellen did the same. And obviously, Ashton does that to a certain extent. So there's already this intimidation factor, but then you add in the fact that people know that at some point in time you have weapons at your
Mhm.
disposal, whether they're on you or near you, and that you are not afraid to shoot them off in a meeting, whether it's intentional or
Mhm.
not intentional. It's a whole other intimidation factor and fear factor. And
Right.
then we wonder why there are people that continue to not speak up, to continue to support Rod and what he's doing and sweeping things under the rug. I
Mhm.
believe that there are some instances where they are truly fearful of what could happen to them specifically if they were to try to rebel against the system a little bit.
Right. And I can recall in one of your previous episodes, there was a young lady that you had on as a guest, And one of the questions that you asked her is if she is afraid or fearful of the Parsleys. And I believe that her response, if I remember correctly, is now that she's out of this area geographically, she is so much not really. And that's that long-term emotional effect that narcissistic control has on people. Because there are a lot of times where people physically may get out of a narcissistic abusive situation, but emotionally and psychologically, they're still there until they're completely healed and recovered from it. Mm-hmm. So you could be hundreds of miles away from where you suffered the abuse, but you can be out in public shopping and it's like, oh, is she here? Is he here? You know, but God can break that stronghold, and which he's doing for a lot of people, and completely setting them free, but and restoring them. But back to the situation of the firearm thing, like I stated, I don't ever recall a situation where I knew he was armed when I was with him or other team members were with him. And it goes back into the Ohio statute of carrying a concealed weapon, which that's required by law, especially if it's concealed. And that law may have been updated recently where that permit's not required. But back then, that would certainly have been a requirement. So that's a very serious issue. And
well, but as we all know, the rules don't apply to them, right? So I'm not shocked. I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked. But I know their mentality, especially when they're in their own building and in their, you know, that they feel like anything goes, and and there are going to be other people to kind of cover their tracks if something ends up happening that that would cause more attention on them than they would really want.
I put it like the paper trail will always lead to someone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But it's we can say it all day, you know, the decades long the abusive pattern that's taken place. And if you buck against the system, you're gone. You know,
sure.
It's yes, 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 yes. And I know from my own personal experience, once you begin to say no, because I can remember when things begin to go south with me, it's like, hey, I'm not available. I can't do that right now. I got something going on in my personal life. I got things going on at home. Can we change that time from that to this? I just can't do that right now. And the moment you start saying no, it's you're on your way out. And I can remember where my tenure on staff began to come to an end. And it was around the same time frame, just after the 9/11 incident happened that, you know, that really crippled our country. And I could tell that my time at the end was close. I was already like, God, I can't take no more of this. You know, it's affecting me physically, it's affecting me mentally. And I think my time is coming. But it's like that narcissistic relationship where you got that love bomb, you got that value, and then you got that discard. And one thing with a narcissist is this: they always win. So even if they begin to sense that you're ready to get out, it doesn't matter if it's your personal relationship, if it's professional, or if it's even ministry, they have to win. They have to control the narrative. They're getting rid of you before you can say, hey, I'm done with this. They have to put the hit out there, the smear campaign out there. Well, she did this or he did that, you know. But I could tell when my time was coming to an end by the treatment, by the distance, by the silent treatment. And it's like, wait a minute, we're your security. We're the ones that are here to protect you and protect your family. You know, why are you talking to us like this? Why are you talking to me like this? And but I can go back to another experience, even with Miss P, you know, Pastor's mom. Sure. And I remember, Robin, an incident where there were some renovations or some upgrading taking place in what we call the B and C wing back then. And I remember, I think Pastor was with this executive team, if I recall correctly, and the CFO, John Laria, and Ms. P, and maybe a couple administrative assistants, and they were in the B and C wing area. So it was during business hours. So I'm going to stand over here near the door and make sure that, no one comes in here while they're doing their walkthrough. And pastor needed some paperwork or something, and from the executive wing. So I'm like, okay, hey, I'll go run and I'll get it. Now listen to me. I'll go get it and I'll bring it to him. And Miss P just steps in and goes, no. I'm like, ma'am. She goes, you get it. You bring it to John, and John will give it to pastor. And we're all standing in the same vicinity of each other. So it's like, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to hand this paperwork to pastor. I've got to give it to John. John gives it to pastor, and we're all standing there in the same vicinity of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's so bizarre, right? I mean, it's
we're
like
peasants.
it's the control, right? It's you're going to follow these instructions. You're going to abide by whatever I say, even if it's not logical.
Yeah, and it's almost like that mentality that we're not worthy. We're just peasants. We're ministry peasants. The other
Ministry
parsley,
peasants.
and
Yeah.
we're just peasants. And another related incident was this: there used to be a gentleman on staff that was actually related to them, and he also taught at the Bible College, and Marion Dalton Jr., and he went by the name of Junior. And I remember one incident where there was a conversation taking place between Miss P and some other people, and someone needed to get a message to Junior. And I'm like, okay, I'll go give him the message. I'm going to go tell Junior what this message is. And she goes, no, we call him Junior. You call him Brother Dalton. I'm like, and I had that same sense of the previous incident. And it's like, okay, you can't call him Junior. You have to call him Brother Dalton. It's not even like a public event or anything like that. We're just all in the same vicinity, the same area,
Mm-hmm.
It's just, but you're just not worthy to call him Junior. You're just a little peasant. You call him Brother Dalton,
Yeah.
And it's just, there's just various different experiences. And then once you hear the experiences that other people have had, you're able to look back and you see a consistent pattern of narcissistic abuse, of pride, of arrogance, and it's just, I thought I went through a lot, but hearing some of the experiences from your guests, I'm just like shaking my head like, wow. And this stuff's been going on for decades and decades and decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a trail of tears. And I don't think I asked you this question either, but since we're kind of in the area of you leaving your position but staying at the church, what was the mentality that you had in your own head at that point in time, that there was a justification in leaving your position there and serving actually on staff, but that you were still going to attend church there, even though you had seen and heard and experienced all of these things?
Because like others, I was caught up in that web, like Raw Harvest is my church. Raw Harvest is the church of churches in the United States. If you're not going to Raw Harvest, you're not going to church. So even after you experience systematic narcissistic abuse in your position there on staff, you just disregard all that, and you try to separate the two. Okay, that was my job, but this is church. And I also believe that staying at the church meant I was still in the will of God. So back then, I didn't know my time of separation had come from being on staff. And I had people actually approach me like, you still go to church here? I'm like, yeah, this is my church. They're like, most people, when they leave or they get dismissed or something like that, they leave the church too. I'm like, nah, this is my church. And I tried for the longest to separate the two, but it never happened. And sometimes I hear people talk about, some of your guests talk about the finances, and the giving campaign. Now I can say this as a believer, there have been times in my life where I needed a miracle, and I've given I've given to the Lord, believing for the Lord to do something for me that I needed, and God has done it. But even when I was a giver there, I don't give the rod, I give the God. you know,
Yeah.
and our motives need to be checked. Why people give, you know,
Mhm.
and people shouldn't give because they want to be in his clique. They want to be in his inner circle. They want to sit up front. But I'll start by saying this. There's two different incidents that I experienced personally. And one was, I remember when I was on staff as a security officer, and those camp meetings were demanding. You're talking 14, 18-hour days, 6 days straight, 3 services a day. And me and the other officers, by Wednesday, we're just depleted, you know? And I remember the gentleman that was director, I wasn't promoted at that point, but I remember him calling us into the office. And we're like, oh, here we go, we're going to get it, you know? But he starts talking and everything. He closes his office door and he's like, does anybody, you know, you can almost read from him. He really didn't want to ask us this, but it's like he was told to do it.
He
He
had to.
says,
Yeah.
yeah. And he goes, I know y'all working a lot of hours and everything, but does anybody want to give back some of their hours as volunteer time? And we're like, what? I mean, we're working 14, 18-hour days. What do you mean give back our hours as volunteer hours? And I don't know if he was referencing hours that we've already worked or hours coming up for the rest of the week, but either one are inappropriate. It's wrong. It's like, no, we got homes to take care of. No, I'm not giving back my hours. So there was almost this compulsion that it was something we had to do. But each of us said, no, we're not doing that. You're paying us for the hours that we've worked, you know? And that's when, as far as the finances go, that was one of the incidents that made me go, wait a minute. I mean, how can you ask somebody to do that? You know, would
Well,
you
it's
go
actually
somewhere?
against the law for them to so just between you and I and whoever's watching this,
Mhm.
when you work at an organization, whether it's ministry or not ministry, if you want to volunteer hours, it cannot be in the same department that you work in.
Wow.
So even if you would have said, yes, I'll volunteer some of these hours, it's actually unlawful not only for them to ask you to do that, but it would have
Mhm.
been unlawful for them to have allowed you to do that and then not paid you.
Wow. And
Yeah.
we're supposed to be ignorant and not know that, you know?
Well,
But
that's what they count on. They count
yeah,
on ignorance. They count on biblical ignorance. They count
yeah.
on people, drinking the Kool-Aid, for lack of a
Mhm.
better term, and just believing everything that they're spewing as gospel, and that you do not test anything that's being said. You do not research anything that's being
Right,
said because that keeps you under their thumb.
right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
just the control was mind blowing. And I can look back and say, when they asked me to assume the position of acting security director, it's like the first thing that I was made known of is you're salaried, you're salaried, you're salaried. And I'm like, and this is my division director at the time, reinforcing the fact that I'm salaried. Okay, I'm salaried. I understand what that means. You know, I don't get paid by the hour. I make a certain salary. Okay, here's your cell phone. Okay, you're on call 24/7. Cool, because I'm still in this high, wow, I'm so thankful, Lord, for this position that you're placing me in, and you're going to grace me to do this job. It wasn't long before those 40-hour days, I'm sorry, those 40-hour weeks became 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks, on call 24/7, traveling, going places, and it's just running errands. And it's like when you tally up, if you were paid hourly, you'll probably, break the bank of the ministry, you know. But I recall that, and it's like, wow, I can't imagine how many other people will have similar stories. It's like I'm salaried, but I'm 24/7. I'm at World Harvest churches, becking the call, and it's even affecting my health. It's affecting my home. It's crazy. Um, but I say that to say this. I remember another incident, and this is after I'm no longer on staff. And I'm thinking it's around 2014. maybe even 2015, somewhere in that time area. And I believe it was a Wednesday night service. I don't think it was a Sunday night service, but it was a Wednesday night service. And this was back before they renovated the sanctuary to what
Okay.
it is now, what, if you want to call it a sanctuary. But I remember back then the stone walls and the two large screens. And I'm just a member. I'm not on staff any longer or anything like that. But I went to Wednesday night service. And I remember sitting in service, and the way the flow of service, when you've been there long enough, you can tell by if pastor hasn't entered the sanctuary yet, you can tell by the flow of the service if he's there or not.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way the flow of service was going, our pastor's not here tonight. You know, place is almost empty. You could tell it's one of those pastors not here tonight services. And the senior elder was, it's like he was conducting the service, and the way it was going, I was getting to feel that, you know, Elder Canfield's doing service tonight. Yeah. And so I remember the two big screens that were in the sanctuary at that point. And sometimes the TV department will pan the sanctuary, the congregation. And I'm looking up, and the camera or the pan stopped. And a professional athlete, a well-known NBA name, this professional athlete was in service that night. And I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so. Wow, he's in service with us tonight. That's cool. And it's almost like the TV department was like, wow, look who's here tonight. And they panned in on that gentleman for about 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then went back to a regular shout of the service. And I kid you not, it wasn't maybe 15, 20 minutes later, the A-wing doors open, and Pastor Parsley walks into the service. I'm like, that's odd. But after conversing with the senior elder for a little while, he got up on the platform and he takes up an offering. And when he's doing this, he's on the platform, but he stands to, if you're facing the platform, it would have been to our right, his left. And the way he was standing, he was positioned in the vicinity of that professional athlete. And I'm sitting in my seat in the pew going, I'm thinking to myself, I ain't going to say anything because I don't want anybody around me today. I'm like, he came in here to take up an offering. I cannot believe this, you know? So when it comes to finances, as the word impropriety, I won't go as far as saying that, but those two incidents, the camp meeting paid for the security officers and the incident with that professional athlete, those stand out the most that I've experienced personally.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you also mentioned, which we've touched on in several other episodes, was that there was most certainly a pressure and almost a requirement of most staff members, if not all staff members, that if they had children, they were to be in World Harvest Christian Academy, which is now Harvest Preparatory School. And because they wanted to keep that money circulating within their own organization. Yes.
And I never heard it mentioned that way, but that certainly appears to be the case. There was pressure. And I was married when I was on staff then, and I don't have any biological kids, but I helped my ex-wife raise her two. And into the academy they go. You know, because you were pressured. It may have not been verbal. In some cases, it was verbal, but there was a pressure. Hey, you got to show full commitment. If you're in all the way, regardless of the impact that it has on your home financially. Your kids are in the academy. So what would happen is, and I was just thinking one day, so if you work there and your kids are in the academy there, not just one, two, or however many kids a family has, that money just circles and comes right back into the ministry. So it's like when all's said and done, you're basically working for free.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's absolutely no question about it whatsoever that was not only the mentality, but that was also the motive behind making sure that your kids were staying within the organization.
Right. And you know what? I'm going to make a comment now. If you need to edit it out, you can, but it just came to mind. So I'm going to go ahead and say it, regardless of who may not agree with it or like it. But I am aware that there was an issue that happened when pastor's daughter, because I haven't had any contact when she became an adult or anything like that. Back in my day, she was like a teenager or very young. But how can you require your staff? And I know it became an issue in the ministry. You're requiring your staff to have their kids go to the academy, but you're going to send your daughter to Columbus School for Girls. And that began to circulate around the ministry. And that fire got put out, and his daughter ended up eventually going to the academy, just like children of staff members.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and she had a lot of privileges while she was there, like never going to class and becoming valedictorian and her grades getting changed, which you weren't a part of those things, but other guests and several credible people have verified that all of those things did in fact happen, and they are true. And so that probably would not have been the case had she gone to Columbus School for Girls. But at at the demise of many others, she was offered and still is many privileges that are not extended to anyone else.
Yeah. And I never really had a whole lot of contact. Yeah, I really didn't have a whole lot of interaction with the kids, with pastor's children. While I can remember one detail where I was with Ashton, and I believe it was back when she was in high school, and I believe that there was a football game here in the area. I think at Pickerington High School or something like that, if I remember correctly. And I got a call that she was going to the game, and they needed somebody to be with her. And of course, yeah, I got it covered. Cool. And I had the telephone numbers to get a hold of Pastor or Miss Joni if I needed them or anything like that. And the pastor's a dad too, and that's one of the compassionate sides, if I ever saw one of him. Is like, don't let nothing happen to my daughter, But that detail was a handful. And that football stadium is like trying to keep her close, it was like she was let out of jail or something. And it's like, oh my Lord, this girl is wearing my feet out, So keeping an eye on her was very difficult and challenging. It's like, I don't want anybody with me. I want to go do what I want to do. Hey, your parents said such and such, And but that was one of the and the only personal detail that I've done for the kids. Everything else, they were together as a family, and it's unfortunate to see some of the things that are taking place in her life today. But prayerfully and hopefully, the Lord can get a hold of her and do a work in her heart. And one of the things that I like to mention is this. And I've had interaction with all the pastor's family members, him, his mom, the kids, his mother-in-law, Miss Joni's mom. And it's almost like you can see a difference, because I look at Miss Joni and her mom, and I look at Pastor and his mom, and there's a total complete difference. But both are just like the other. When I look at Miss Joni and I look at her mom, we all called her Miss Askoff. And all I can say is kindness, empathy, and compassion. And I remember when I first got to Columbus, I had no idea what God was going to do in my life and through my life, as far as being on staff, being on the protection detail, and serving to that capacity in the security department. My original plan, like we said earlier, was to come here and get back to Florida, But back then, 95, 96, Miss A was actually director of student housing. So she took care of the dorms. And she imparted something into me that I'll never forget and I'll always appreciate. And I learned something from her I did not learn in 2 years of textbooks. Okay. And that's not to belittle the instructors or anything like that. But I was walking to the dorms one day, and this is back when I was a student. She goes, Michael, come here. I need to talk to you. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she taught me a lesson about posture, about standing, and how to properly walk. And to see her love and her care, she was like a mama away from home, you know?
Hmm.
And that's one of the most powerful experiences that I had with her. But anytime, any interaction with Miss Joni or her mom, where I would say those three words describe them the most: compassion, kindness, and empathy. Where on the other hand, like I said, even though I believe there was a work done by the Lord in Miss Parsley's heart as her days came to an end, there's a similarity between her and Pastor Parsley as far as the crudeness, the rudeness, the temper, everything, the abrasiveness, the narcissism. And I remember one other incident with Miss P is I was working one day on the church campus, back to being on staff now, that topic. And I got a call from one of the receptionists that said, hey, there's a delivery truck trying to get in the A wing, and we need you to come talk to this guy and get this taken care of. And anybody familiar with the campus area, and I don't want to give away too much security sensitive information, but you turn off a certain road and there's this long driveway that leads back into the executive area and where two gates are. And this is probably back before they installed the gates. And so I get back there. I'm like, hey, sir, I'm here to help you. He says, man, I'm just trying to make a delivery. I said, okay, follow me in a security vehicle. I'll get you back to the dock area. And the guy's face, Robin, was like, man, and he told me this. He said, man, I'm just trying to do my job. Some old lady just came out here and just started screaming and yelling at me. I knew exactly who he was talking about, but I wasn't going to let him know that's Miss P, that's Pastor's mom.
Hmm.
But I say that to say this: we don't know who people are, where they are in their life. That could have been a visit to the campus that made him say, hey, I think I want to come to a Sunday morning service. And
Hmm.
if I had said, oh, that's Pastor's mom, that's Miss P, that could have completely turned him off, you know? But that's just something we all need to take note of. We need to be aware. We don't know who we're talking to at any given moment or where they are in their life, spiritually and
Hmm.
emotionally.
Well, and that's a great point, because I think that it's important that people do see God in us, and that we try to show up. I mean, that doesn't mean that we're perfect, and that doesn't mean that we're always going to be in the best mood or be having the best day, but that when people encounter us, they should encounter some love, they should encounter some compassion, they should encounter empathy, somebody that truly is showing that they care about them as a person, and that they are there is an interest in how they are doing and how we can be helpful to them.
Right. I put it like
And that's
the
unfortunate that that many people do not see it in these pastors and these people that
right.
surround them.
And it's a nationwide issue, not just an issue here in Columbus, Ohio,
Sure.
but
Absolutely.
nationwide. We're seeing God begin to deal with some things. And I put it like this: the root produces the fruit, you know?
That's
And
that's good.
a lot of people are being revealed that who or what is truly their root, you know? And we all have bad days, Robin. I've had bad days, I've had bad days in traffic, and others can probably testify. But it's the consistent pattern of behavior that reveals the fruit. You don't just have one when it's been going, when there's a pattern of abuse for decades, that's not just a one moment flare up, you know? And you
Mhm.
can't go on damage control and try and cover up that one incident and say that one incident is all. No, this has been an abusive pattern for decades, and people have been broken by it, and they need to be restored. And that's my for coming on and sharing my experiences and things that I've witnessed. But it's I don't know. It's just been mind boggling, and the stories that are coming out, the abuse, and the cover ups, the hush money. It's mind boggling.
Absolutely.
Because,
Well, and I
Mhm.
have a question for you, because you mentioned that you're now divorced, but that you
Yeah,
were married at the time. Um, how did these long hours and this being on call 24/7 and just being in that place, I would have to assume that it affected your marriage and your home life to a certain extent, but I know that there was also issues within the congregation that caused issues with you and your wife and now ex-wife.
yeah.
Would you like to discuss that now?
Yes, I don't mind at all. I believe with any family uh, that attends Royal Harvest or is a member there, where one of the spouses works on staff and their salary, and that at some point all the long hours will eventually affect the home, affect the kids, and it's demanding. And you got some families where both, because I believe we were both on staff at some point, but it's eventually it affects the home. And if not the demand of hours, it's just the effect of the abuse that one or both spouses go through, and then they bring that home. Either they become abrasive toward the other spouse, or they come home and they're broken from the emotional trauma that they've experienced, and now they need their spouse or their family members to comfort them and console them. And even though they know at some point, hey, I need to get out of here, I need to leave, I need to find me something else. But how do I get out and find something else where my choices may be limited? But at the same time, on our end, that doesn't justify the choices that we willfully make that could bring a detrimental impact to our marriages and to our covenants. And I don't mind sharing this, that in my personal situation, my personal life, there were some issues going on in our marriage that were ungodly. And I tried for the longest. I said, let's go see Elder Canfield. Let's go to counseling. And, but, she refused. And at some point she says, well, I'll go, but I want to go first. I said, okay, cool. That's a start. Go ahead and go. And I had conversations with the senior Elder Canfield leading up to that point. I'm like, cool, she wants to go first. She can go first. And then I'll go second. I just want something done. And little did I know, when I eventually went in to speak with Elder Canfield, the script had been totally, completely flipped. So
Mm,
I'm now defending myself when I'm walking right. I'm honoring my covenant. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what I came in here for. I came in here because of such and such, Elder Canfield. But that got totally flipped. And but as time wore on, I began to come into some information that some activity was taking place with another man, well, one other man in the church. There may have been others that I suspect, and a gentleman by the name of, and I think he was a student at the Bible College. He was from the Bahamas, I believe, and that he come up here to go to the Bible College. And I guess, if I recall correctly from information that I came into contact with, uh, he was one of Pastor Parsley's favorites. And Pastor Parsley was supposed to be mentoring him and eventually launch or release him out into ministry. And in my meeting with Elder Canfield, as soon as I mentioned that name, uh, the look on Elder Canfield's face is like, and I'm like, uh-oh, something's not right. Now my security radar's on, because I could tell by his body language and the way that he responded, this ain't the first time he's heard this name.
mhm.
And I didn't reveal to Elder Campbell at that point, but I'd known through conversation with other people who are very good sources. Let me stress, very good sources, that this gentleman was already reputable for wrecking at least two other marriages within that
Mm,
church. So I say, Elder Campbell, I want something done about this. And I said, I'm reaching out to this guy. He initially said, I said, dude, I want to talk to you. I need something to talk to you about. I got something to talk to you about. And he initially said yes. And through my ex, he was able to find out why I wanted to talk to him. And then he just went ghost. Couldn't get a hold of this guy for nothing. Couldn't get him to reply to me when he had replied to me previously. You know, one thing I've learned, Robin, about the work that I do is the importance of documentation. Whether it's within a marriage, employment, abuse at work, abuse in ministry, document, document, document. So when I went in to see Elder Canfield, I've got emails, I've got text messages, I've got IM messages. And we always want to keep our documentation somewhere safe, because we never know when something might get lost, shredded, or what have you. It's always good to have a backup. I'll just throw that out there. But I eventually asked Elder Canfield if I could meet with him and another elder and this gentleman. So I'm trying to do it the Bible way. I reached out to my brother. He knows why I want to meet with him. So he's giving me the cold shoulder. Now I'm going to go to two. I'm going to go to two elders, and we're going to try and get a hold of this brother and bring him in, and we bring some sort of resolution to this issue. So I laid everything before the elders. And Elder Canfield pretty much said, okay, we're going to reach out to him. We're going to get a hold of this guy, and we're going to get him in here and talk to us. So at this point, I don't know about all these other marriage issues at World Harvest Church. So I'm like, oh, great. You know, the elder's going to help me. The elder, cool, you know? And he says, I'll get back with you. I'm like, okay, cool. It was about 2 weeks later. I'm like, man, I haven't heard back from leadership yet. I need to give them a call. If I recall correctly, I think I reached out and called. I didn't want to leave a voicemail. So I sent Elder Campbell, I believe, an email saying, hey, what's the follow-up with this guy? Because I haven't heard anything back. Each time that I had to communicate with church leadership regarding this issue, now they would reply or respond, but I was always the one that had to initiate the contact. We're talking over 20 years in this church. I would expect, hey, they would reach out to me. But anyways, I finally got a response from Elder Canfield via email that says, last we heard is he made an announcement that he's going back to the Bahamas and then on to Australia. And that was the end of it. And I feel like I never got the type of resolution that I should have gotten. And I'm thinking, how is this guy from the Bahamas all of a sudden has the money to get out of the country? Because I'm sure because of his immigration status, he either is not working at all or working on a very limited basis. So how did the money just pop up out of the blue for him to get out of the country and I not get the type of resolution that I feel like I should have gotten? And I'm thinking, there's no way they would get him out of the country and just sweep this under the rug. And I can't prove at this point that that's what took place, but by the sequence of evidence that I do have, and now looking at all these other incidents of cover-ups within marriages and the promiscuity that's permeating that place right now, I don't put it past them. The behavior there, it's like there's a systematic pattern of abuse and misconduct that starts from the ministry and it just spreads into every area of the ministry, the Bible college and everywhere else. It doesn't matter if you're on staff, if you're a member, or if you're a student, it just spreads and infects everything. And I just feel for the stories I don't know about, but those are the ones that affect me personally. And I can even remember back when I was on staff as acting security director and coming close to my departure. And I remember one night I was working, and I don't mind sharing this, and it's public knowledge anyway, public information. But I got pulled over one night, and over near the one afternoon, over near the Bible College campus that used to be over on Wright Road. And me and the gentleman, me and the officer, we were talking and everything. He says, you know, you got traffic issues back in Florida? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And it turned out I had some traffic citations that needed to be taken care of. This is like years before I came up here that I never took care of. And I needed to get those taken care of. And that happened around the same time my departure from World Harvest as a staff member. May be related, may not be related, but I don't mind sharing that. And but it's like once the ministry made a decision that they were ready to, I guess, upgrade in security or whatnot, and that they were, I knew I was, acting security director, and I had no issue with that. And they had a gentleman come in, and the division director told me, he goes, "Oh, we want you to show this guy around. We're thinking about hiring him to help out and everything." And I'm like, "Okay, cool," And behind closed doors, they're already starting their preparation to get me out. And here I am training my replacement that I'm not supposed to know about, you
Oh,
know?
wow.
And I'm like, wow, God, I mean, I can't believe this. The ministry would treat you like this. And you did a interview of a student or a former student a little over maybe a week. His name, I believe, was Raphael. And
Yes.
one of the stories that he mentioned was, I guess, something happened with his work visa, his past, something like that, to where if he ever made a decision to leave, work somewhere else, or be a part of another ministry, there was this plan out to revoke either his visa, his
Well,
passport,
they
whichever.
were, yeah, they were research. So that was the part that I actually told him because he wasn't aware of that.
Yes.
That when he had decided that he was going to leave, they were
Mhm.
having me check into on whether we could get his visa revoked.
Wow. That
Yeah.
is so ungodly and so unministry like, you know? And I do recall he mentioned something about he was invited to breakfast with a couple people. And here he is
Yes.
opening his heart and pouring his hurt heart out, thinking that they were there to encourage him and strengthen him. And they were nothing but spies there to collect information to take back to the head. And there was a similar issue that's happened with me. And I can recall, even since I've been gone, there's two individuals, and you can edit this if you need to. One's name is John Jarman, and one name is Charles Small, and that I went to Bible college with, and both of them are very close to the family. And just out of nowhere, I'm getting IMs, I'm getting text messages, and I'm getting called. "Hey, brother, how you doing? What's going on? How are you?" I'm like, "I haven't heard from you. I'm doing okay. How about you?" "Well, I'm doing great. And hey, we're going to have a fellowship at Kingy's Pizza. I'm going to be in town. You want to go?" I'm like, if I can clear my schedule, I'll go. And each time we would talk, it was all not there, but in general, different phone calls, text messages. "You've been in Columbus a long time. What's your long-term plans? What you believe in God for this year?" And I'm like, this is odd. Every time they call me or reach out to me, it's like they're trying to find something out.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are trying to find something out. And I would ask myself, why does anybody want to know what my long-term plans are? When am I getting out of Columbus and going back to Florida? And it goes back to my concern about the way my marriage ended and how I didn't feel
Mhm.
like I got the resolution that I needed from the elder's office. And they just wanted me out of Columbus before the truth came out.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, it's so unfortunate that there is so much of that that goes on there. It very much is cult like, and if not just a cult in general, but then, I liken it to the documentary and the series that was done on Scientology, because
Mhm.
the control, the fear factor, how important money is, the amount of money that you give, or
Mhm.
the stature that you have within the
Oh,
community
yes.
or within your
Yeah.
position, that determines your position within that church. If
Yes.
you decide to leave, if you say anything against the ministry, people are conditioned to run back and tell somebody.
Yeah.
If you leave, people are told or encouraged to, you know, disown you,
Yeah.
or do away with you, no longer having contact with you. And so it's very bizarre that people that say that they love God and love people would would behave in the way that they behave in general, but then you don't get love anymore. You don't there is no kind words or kindness shown towards you if you don't want to be a part of their ministry anymore.
Mhm. It's that mafia mentality that I was talking
That's
about
right.
earlier, that smear campaign. And it's like, how dare you leave? How dare you leave War Harvest? How dare you quit? How dare you take your kids to another school? And it's just so systematic. It's like, while you're there, you're in the good graces of the Don, the mafia boss. But once you determine that your season is up, and another form of manipulation that I've seen is this: if someone feels that their season is up and it's time for them to leave, it's like, you can't hear from the Lord for yourself. He tells
Yes.
pastor first. He tells
Yep.
pastors first. And then he tells you. That's not the way it operates. That's not the way it goes. God's going to speak to you, and he can
Mhm.
confirm to another individual, but we don't go around, well, I can't do anything. I can't. They can get rid of you when they want to get rid of you, but you can't leave at your own volition. Because if you do, then the attack, the smear campaign, your name is dragged through the mud. There's something that you were doing wrong. And that's why I get a sense they got to get that feel from you if you're thinking about leaving, so they can get out ahead of the game and get that narrative out there that there's something, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with the Parsley family, because they're above everything and they're above everybody.
Mhm.
And it's just that sick, twisted intimidation, manipulation, and control. And you were saying something earlier about, certain treatment that certain people get, preferential treatment. And I can recall a couple incidents that happened with seating. And this is back as security director, when we were dealing with some issues in the security department, where we need to take things up a notch for pastor and his family. And what we decided to do is, looking at the layout, we wanted our security personnel placed in certain seats within the first two rows. And that way, if anything happened, a potential threat or something like that, we could take care of pastor and his family, and take care of that individual or those individuals that are bringing the threat. And I kid you not, it was like hair pulling with the individuals who are responsible for coordinating seating every single Sunday. And it was the same individual. And it's like, okay, we need these seats. And she'd be like, no, no, you can't sit there. You can't sit there. We're like, you don't understand. This is about security. We need some person on this end of the row. We need somebody on this end of the row. We need somebody across the aisle on this end of the row, and so on. And a couple other positions on the second row. And this individual, she just wanted to totally, completely forget security and place and give other people preferential treatment because they were in the inner circle. And I'm
Or
like,
there were high donors, right?
yeah, yes. And I got
Yeah.
another story about that one. So it escalated to the point to where, after week, Sunday after Sunday, dealing with the same issue, it had to go to the division director and above him. And they finally got her, hey, give these guys what they want. This is for the protection of pastor and his family. And she finally backed down. But there was another incident with this same individual where this is like after I was gone and I wasn't any longer on staff. I decided to sit in the risers, and because you don't want that attention down front once you leave if you're on staff. So you don't want to distract the service or anything like that just from your presence. So I'm seated in the risers, and a mutual friend of my ex-wife and I, the husband, came and sat with me. He goes, "Can I sit with you, Mike?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And these are very well-to-do people, very, very good donors to the ministry. And so we're sitting, and the service is about to start. It hadn't started yet, and that same individual that coordinated seating comes back to the risers. And she calls him by his first name that I won't mention. And she says, "Hey, why don't you come down front?" He goes, "No, I'm sitting here talking to Mike. I'm good. I don't want to come down front." She goes, "But we got a good seat for you right down front. You can enjoy the service." And he goes, "No, thank you. I appreciate it. but I'm okay. And she's like, oh, I'll do anything for a friend, And then she looks at me just sort of like, and then turns around and walks off. Like I'm just this little peasant, And
Yeah.
that attitude
Peon.
stems down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after
Yeah.
she walks off, he's like, he just shakes his head, like, but
Well, and
yeah,
that's the thing, if people were coming to church there the very first time, right? And this is what they experience when they come in there, that could be what makes or breaks them
yes,
in having a relationship with God and being saved. And I don't understand. God views us all the same. He doesn't care how much money we have. He doesn't care how we dress. He doesn't care um
mm,
whether what color our skin is or where we
right,
come from or any of that. He cares about our hearts,
there you go.
and we should be extending that same love and that same
Hmm.
acceptance in general, but especially when we're in church.
Yes.
And can you imagine, a first time person coming in there and and I've heard stories like this. They
Mm,
come there with all these expectations, and the first thing that they're met with is, you can't sit here, you can't
mm,
sit down here, you can't be here. And what kind of impression does that give? Like, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough,
no,
you're not dressed
exactly.
well enough, you don't have enough money to sit down here with the elites. You got to
Hmm.
go back there, or maybe just not even at all, because I can tell you, there at times in my life, had I walked into a church like that and have been treated that way, I would have turned around and walked out.
Yes, I agree.
And why are we not concerned with those things? Why are we
Mm,
so concerned with the stuff on the outside that doesn't amount to a hill of beans
wow.
when we're talking about people's souls?
Right. Persona and public image and
Yeah,
marketing.
yeah,
And we want TV to go out in certain ways. And I say this to say this when TV is probably, and like I said, I've been detached from the ministry since 2018, but the marketing medias and everything, how you got to give a certain persona. There are certain things that you can do that attracts a certain type of person, and that you got to keep their attention. That's why we see all the entertainment that's creeping in, not just at World Harvest, but nationally in this country, the seeker-friendly method. And now, speaking of that, it's like I believe that Pastor started off good, like so many have, but
mhm,
somewhere something changed. And when he began to get into that TBN clique, something really changed in him. Or if it was already changed, it intensified and worsened,
yeah,
And it's like, I don't know, that story that we always hear going to school growing up. Nobody wants to tell a king that he's naked. And the elders, the executive board, the executive committee, they're just going to yes, 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 yes. He can be completely in left field, but nobody's going to have the courage to stand and tell him. And sometimes he don't want to hear. He don't care,
right.
what your opinion is. And it's like there's another issue in Acts where I believe it was Peter that said, "We're going to give ourselves to the Word of God. You appoint men to take care of the business, and we're going to give ourselves to the Word of God and prayer and preaching." But it's not like that at War Harvest Church. It's like he knows everything. He has to be involved in everything. He has to make the final decision on everything. It doesn't matter if you're the acting director of security. It doesn't matter if you're over television. It doesn't matter if you're in sound. It doesn't matter if you're up in the choir. It doesn't matter if you're in custodial. All are valuable. All those gifts are essential and valuable. But you don't sweep the floor like that. You sweep it like this. All right. That's not enough zeros. We need more zeros. It doesn't matter what you do. It's like he knows more. And it takes humility and grace for us to admit, I can't do all of this. I'm going to accept the men and women that God has brought to help me do this. But
Yeah.
there's a rejection of that. At least that's what I sensed when I was there. He knows
No.
everything.
It's the same. I mean, I was there from 2019 to 2022, but even when you listen to other people's experiences, and even just the people that, talk about, not necessarily even on the podcast, but people that have worked
Mhm.
there or been associated with there, that is very, very much the sense and the feeling is. And I would even ask, why do you have people with the title of director if you don't even trust them to make the
Right,
smallest of decisions?
right.
I mean, but it's that control, it's making sure that Rod is aware of everything and he's making
Yes,
all of the decisions, even when he wants other people to pretend like they're the ones making the decisions. He is
yes,
most certainly the one that is calling the shots, and
right.
he is aware of everything that happens in that place, down to, what kind of ballpoint pens they're using.
Yes. Who turned the lights off tonight? But
Yeah.
and it's just I don't know. It's like, and one other thing that I can point out, Robin, is this: it's like when he's having one of his fits, when he's having one of his tirades, or if he's not happy about something being done or not being done, he can come directly to you, not go to your division director, and then your division director comes to your supervisor, or your supervisor comes to you. He can bypass all those. But if you want to reply or ask him something or get answers from him, regardless, you got to go through 5 layers of political, religious bureaucracy.
Hmm.
And it doesn't even make it to him. You know,
No.
it's
Yeah.
just,
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah.
it's the experience there is something I would advise anybody. And this is just on my heart right now. If if you are considering employment at World Harvest Church, I highly recommend that you pray and that you seek the face of God. If you're married, embrace the recommendations and concerns of your spouse before you even consider stepping foot into that place and accepting a position with them. Because the honeymoon stage is good and sweet. And once you sign the dotted line and you're on staff there, everything completely changes. If you're in another part of the country and you're considering uprooting and moving your family to Columbus, Ohio, because you've been offered a position and you think it's going to be one way, and then you're going to get here and find out it's something totally, completely different. It's seek God. You can hear the Lord for yourself if you're born again. If you're currently there and you're considering leaving, be very, very mindful of who you share that with. Because you share it with the wrong person, it's going to make it back to the executive meeting, you know? And you keep that with yourself, between you and the Lord. And if you're married, that's between you, the Lord, and your spouse. If you're someone who's already left and you're considering going back, you better seek the face of God, and you better know it's God speaking to you. And take his wisdom, his advice, and his counsel to heart. If you don't feel a peace and witness of the Holy Ghost, don't do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly.
Mhm.
So Mike, Michael, sorry. I
You
keep
know,
calling you Mike. I'll call you Michael.
I go by both. You're okay.
So is there anything else that you want to add before we get into kind of where things are for you now, how you have transitioned out of World Harvest Church, what your life after your,
Mhm.
how you've worked on your own healing process, that sort of thing?
I'd love to. And all I can say is God is good. The Lord is gracious. He's full of mercy, compassion, and kindness. And excuse me, there's one other incident that happened. And I want to share that because people may not know the full effect that trauma has on us. and especially systematic narcissistic abuse and the trauma that it causes. I remember robbing a Sunday morning service, and I was serving on a protection detail. And none of this I was made aware of until it actually happened. And apparently, some decisions were made where pastor's dogs, he had a new kennel of dogs.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah, I remember this now.
yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, I think he was going to sell them, not in the middle of a service, but he was going to let the congregation know at the end of the service that he was going to be making them available for purchase, if I believe correctly.
And these
And
are like were these like the trained security dogs, like the German Shepherds, or these were
I,
just regular dogs?
I don't think they were part of the German Shepherd kennel. I don't remember for sure, because
Okay.
back when I was on staff, I don't think he had a dog until later when I was getting ready to leave, if I remember correctly. And so I don't think these dogs were a part of that kennel, but they were dogs from a kennel that he had back during that time that I was on staff. And they were pups, and so it wasn't like these big lavish show dogs. They were little puppies from a kennel. But I had no idea any of this was going to be taking place during this service. Nobody made it known to me, beforehand. And so I'm thinking, okay, service is over. He's dismissing and he's ready to go. So I leave from where I'm seated on the second row, and I stand around to the first row beside him, getting ready to get him out of there. And so, okay, the dogs are coming, the dogs are coming, the dogs are coming, the dogs are coming. And I guess the individual that was supposed to be bringing the dogs in were a little bit behind schedule. And it's like he was getting impatient with it, And
Mhm.
a few seconds later, he's standing to my right. I'm standing to his left, right beside him. And he just looks over and just sort of like, he didn't hit me or anything like that. But he was just like, will you go check on them dogs? And I'm like, oh my Lord, you just got off the platform and I will take care of it, sir. So I make a beeline for the usher's door, which was if you're facing the platform, it was to the left inside of a side door there. And before I can get a hold of anyone, someone had already came in with the dogs. And it's like the flip of a switch again. And he's like, oh, aren't they nice? And you could hear him on the mic, oh, aren't they nice and beautiful? Just within a few seconds like that. It's like you turn it on and turn it off. It's like he goes from mean rod to nice rod,
Mhm.
And it was some experiences there. But in everything that I've experienced and things that I've witnessed and other stories that I've heard, God has done a work in me, and I'm not bitter, not even from my experiences at World Harvest, as a staff member, as a student, and as a member, even what happened in my marriage, which is totally unrelated to World Harvest. That's personal home stuff where choices were made by my ex that should not have been made. But I'm not bitter. I'm complete. God has done a work in me. And I still live in the Columbus, Ohio area. And I've been detached from World Harvest since 2018. I'm involved with another ministry, and that's who I've been ordained through. I'm having a blast, and God's led me to do some things online through social media, and I got some other things upcoming that He's directing. And when it comes to systematic narcissistic abuse, whether it be in ministry, whether it be at home, whether it be at work, I think God has laid some people on my heart, and to help them, to let them understand and know that they're not by themselves. God is with them, and He's going to see them all the way out of it. And I believe I shared everything that's on my heart, but I want to end my comments and my testimony by sharing this. God's laid some people in my heart, and there are people that may be stuck in a traumatic situation, maybe there at World Harvest, and they're like, they've been conditioned to believe that if they leave, then they're out of the will of God. And the Lord wants to set them free from that lie, because that's not true. And then there's another group of people that are suffering the physical effects, the emotional effect of what narcissistic abuse and the trauma has done to them physically. We talk about those neurotransmitters and the effect that it has on the body. There are people that have lost a lot of weight, that have gained a lot of weight. dealing with anxiety, dealing with trying to sleep, maybe night dreams, nightmares, so on and so forth. And God wants to do a work in their body. There are people that believe that God signed off or approved of how they were treated while they were affiliated with World Harvest Church or any type of narcissistic abuse. And that's a lie. God does not approve of abuse, and he's not the causer of anything that happened to them. But he wants to be a part of the healing process. He can wipe them clean. He can wash them. He can restore them. And Robin, there's another group of people that believe that God doesn't want anything to do with them anymore, simply because of things, the anger, the hurt, and the frustration that they've expressed toward the Lord. God, I hate you. I don't want to serve you no more. I don't trust you no more. I don't want to be a part of a church. And so the enemy's trying to trick them with condemnation into believing that God won't forgive them and restore them. And that's a lie. God's speaking in them through your ministry that he wants to heal, he wants to restore, and he wants to make them new through his son, Jesus Christ. And there's healing, hope, and recovery for them. And at the same time, leave the parcels in his hand. He's going to render justice his way and his time. But for now, they need to focus on their own healing and trust in the Lord to do it.
Absolutely. I love that. And I appreciate you you saying that. I appreciate the love and the heart that you have for people. And I know you didn't really want to plug your podcast, but can you tell the viewers what is the name of your podcast again?
Yes, it's a YouTube page /
Oh,
podcast.
yeah, YouTube. Yeah.
Remnant Thunder International Ministries.
Remnant Thunder International Ministries.
Yes,
I've subscribed since you told me about it, but I know that your experience and the experience of the others, because there's people that are just in so many different places of their life and their walk with God, and even, you know, their physical and their mental and their financial and emotional and spiritual, all of those things. And not just with World Harvest, from like you said, any narcissistic abuse or any ministry abuse that may not have necessarily been World Harvest. And people are just in these different places, and they need to understand that they are not alone, that there are different phases and steps to the healing process, and that they just need to allow those things to happen and allow God to work in them and heal those things, so that not only can they move forward, but eventually God will use those experiences for positive, for his glory, for them to help other people, and that they not be discouraged that maybe they're just in a spot right now where they're not sure which way they're supposed to go.
Right. And going along with the healing process, it's going to take some time, you know?
Sure.
And it doesn't take, it's not something that may happen instantly and overnight. Yes, God can do that. But people that are going through their healing process, they need to know and understand that there may be a setback from time to time. There may be something that they may drive by the property and it may trigger memories. And they may be thinking, oh, I was making progress, now I'm right back in it. No, don't feel like that. God is patient and he understands. And as each day goes by, he's going to make you stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And like I was saying earlier, there are some that may not be physically there anymore as a part of that ministry, but it's taking some time to depart from it or detach from it emotionally, psychologically. And God understands that. And he's going to work with them and get them through that. And I don't know, I'm going to say one more thing, and that's about, we shouldn't elevate man. We shouldn't idolize man. And we certainly should never, never, never place a man above the word of God. And I would just encourage everybody to just study 2 Timothy chapter 3. People may be wondering, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Do I stay? Do I leave? No matter where the abuse is, whether it's in a ministry, whether it's in a professional career, and whoever the abuser is, 2 Timothy chapter 3 will give them some direction as a decision that they need to make. And I'll just leave that right there.
All right. All right. Well, again, I appreciate you. Thank you for reaching out and agreeing to be on the podcast. And thank you for everyone for watching, supporting, subscribing, liking, and commenting. And keep the messages coming and join us next week for a new guest. Have a good evening.